All right. This is an interview with my mom, Carolee Berntsen, and I'm Paul Berntsen. And it's October of 2010. And we're in St. Louis. And so we just want to get about 20 minutes of understanding what you are and what you value. So I wanted to start with kind of tell us about where you were born and what your family was like, your parents and siblings and stuff.
I was born in Portland Sanitarium, which doesn't sound very good, but that was the name of a Seventh-day Adventist hospital.
Okay.
And I think my mother had a lady doctor way back then, and that's where she practiced.
In Portland, Oregon, right?
Portland, Oregon. Okay. And of course I was raised near Molalla, Oregon, between Molalla and Colton on a farm. And it was a strange farm. We had a few cows and a few chickens, a few sheep, a few horses. And I had the run of a couple hundred acres with the creek running through, Milk Creek and Pickle Creek.
Ah.
And I'd spend a lot of time just down by the water and in the woods by myself, or I would need to go fetch the cows for milking.
Okay.
And they also had the run of this property, much of it. And there were woods and the creek, and they were a little bit hard to round up if they had some bees after them or something. But I always managed to pick flowers while I was gone. Maybe I didn't come home with cows, but I came home with flowers.
And how'd that go over?
Not well. But they understood, that the cows would just run for the brush.
Oh, okay.
If they were being pursued by the bugs.
Okay. Now, your parents were both Swedish?
Yes.
Okay. And they were like second generation in America or something?
Yeah.
Okay. And they came on the Oregon Trail?
No, they were after the Oregon Trail. My father came from Swedholm, Nebraska,
Okay.
where he was born, and most of his siblings were born. I think all of them, where they had a store and business and did the telephone exchange, they called it.
Okay.
And they lived right across from the church by the cemetery. And then my grandfather decided he wanted to go west. And he must have wanted to do that for a long time, because I read a couple of my father's school essays, and it was like the West was the land of plenty and wonderful and tall trees and
Okay.
lots of water.
Okay, so your dad is Herman Chingren,
Yes,
and the guy that you're talking about is his dad,
yes.
and his name was?
Peter Oscar Chingren.
Okay, so they maybe took the train out or something?
Yes,
Okay.
they loaded up and took the train.
In about what year? Just a guess.
Probably 1905. So.
Oh, okay. And then so they're out in Oregon, and tell me about your siblings.
My siblings are Beverly June Monroe now. She's 7 years older, and Judith Lynn Chingren is 5 years younger.
Okay.
So I kind of have the best of both worlds because I can relate to things that they both can,
Okay.
and I can get information from Bev
Okay.
on things that come up about the family and neighbors.
When you were a kid?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So okay. So she was helpful she negotiated some stuff a little bit before you did
Yes.
in life.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And your dad was a farmer
Yes.
/ politician?
Yes. He was very devoted to public life
Okay.
and servanthood, really. But he was social, liked to tell jokes, and in the legislature he and another fellow would dress up like I guess Ole and Axel, and do Swedish dialect things for
Oh, really?
parties and things. And he was always running the literary society in our community. And he would get um, people to play the piano. He led the community singing we always had,
Okay.
the Pledge of Allegiance. And that was a nice thing. We did poetry and plays and things, the children at the school.
Okay. And I know that he was on, I don't want to focus too much on him because this is more about you, but just very briefly, he was involved with state fairs and Lutheran camps and
Yes.
other things too, right?
Right. He was on the fair board and often chairman of the county, Clackamas County Fair Board. So we would spend the whole 3-day fair there in a little cabin on the fairgrounds.
That'd be fun.
It was fun.
Now, Camp Colton,
And Camp Colton, that was just kind of the center of our lives all summer.
that's a Lutheran camp.
It's a Lutheran camp in the woods with 3 creeks running through.
Wow.
Bee Creek, Canyon Creek, and I can't remember the other one. But just rushing kind of mountain streams with big boulders. And when I got a little older, I was an employee of the camp. Worked in the kitchen.
Oh, in the kitchen?
Yes, I was a scullery maid, but
Scullery maid.
yeah.
Okay.
And also, we would have to scrub the floor every day in the kitchen. And once a week, we had to scrub the whole dining hall where the kids would eat. But I also went to camp there
Okay.
as a young kid, 4-H camp, but mostly the Lutheran camps, and heard wonderful speakers that I think influenced me my whole life. When I was quite young, my family camped there for camp for a week in a tent.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes we'd be in a rustic cabin. No heat, no windows, just a shelter.
So when they influenced you, what was the kind of the subject matter?
Well, it was always teaching from the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was so much fun there too. Singing and water follies and campfire every night. We would sing funny songs and meaningful songs. You know.
Okay. And so you were grew up in the Lutheran church?
Yes, in
Okay.
Colton.
Okay. Can you tell me about your faith a little bit?
Well, I think I can't point to the day, but I was always influenced and led to the fact that I knew Jesus Christ was my Savior. And the people around me were generally of that persuasion.
Okay.
My whole family, and the things we did, the music we shared. My folks would go to a concert that was Christian college from far away, or
Okay. And how many generations do you think back were people kind of serious about their faith in your family?
I know my grandparents were,
Okay.
and I think their parents. And at a get-together of our cousins a few years ago at Bev and Bill Monroe's, I was just struck by the sincerity of the Christian faith of just about everybody in the room,
Yeah.
especially my own generation.
Yeah. That's great.
And I am convinced that we should pray for unborn generations, because I think that these people did that so that I could be where I am.
Yeah. That's great.
So I pray for you and your children. And it's hard to picture beyond those you know, but I think it's important because the world's going to get probably more challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in the Bible says that sins follow many generations. I think blessings follow many generations too.
And
that's-
isn't that just a huge relief?
Yeah. So,
Because you can think back on your life and just wish so many things were different.
mhm.
Yeah.
So, when when I was a kid, you'd like always be helping someone who was disadvantaged, like Rose. She was an Indian family and who was a widow, right?
Well, she was unmarried,
Okay. She didn't
and
have.
and then her partner was killed on the railroad tracks.
Okay. But so I know in college you did some social work, right?
Uh-huh.
And was you majored in that?
Yeah,
Okay.
sociology and psychology.
Okay. But anyway, you've always seemed to care and to act upon helping those who are lacking. Whether they don't have a car or they need food or helping with hospice and stuff like that. Um, and not everybody does that kind of stuff. But can you talk to me a little bit about your like what drive your inner motivation to do that?
Um, I just think that I'm able to do something, and if I'm able, I should do it. So there are a lot of things that I think I've left undone because you see so many needs.
Yeah.
So I think part of challenge is sorting out what you can address.
Mm.
And when I was young, not young, but you boys were young, I was asked to organize food for kind of emerging of cultures and races when the racial tension was very high in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
And this function was at a big place in Tacoma. And I did it. And then I prayed. I remember I was out in the boat, Puget Sound, and I prayed that I would be involved locally in things that I could do and not be away from home or focus away.
Okay.
Because that was kind of fun, but I didn't feel it was where I should be.
Okay.
And within weeks, I met Rose Harry and spent years with that family.
I mean years. I mean probably what 25 or more.
Yes. And Edmund just called a few weeks ago,
When, her son.
her oldest boy,
Okay.
and said, "Hi, Carol. I was just wondering how you all were doing." You
And
know,
they never got your name right, Carolee. They just always
No.
say Carol.
they always said Carol.
Isn't that funny?
Uh-huh.
So, but that I thought that was, a great example for Chris and I growing up to see people caring about others that are disadvantaged. And sometimes I didn't like it because afterwards we'd spray Lysol in the car, and I hated the smell of Lysol.
Right.
Things like
you
that.
would say, "Oh, you took those kids again."
And because kids can be selfish and everything.
Oh, yeah, me too.
But I just I think that's kind of a mark on your life that you always take the time to to be helping others and to not be self-focused, though life brings all kinds of different things. So
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I'm really thankful you feel that way because I hope I didn't neglect
No.
my home.
No, not at all. No. And if you had advice for people like 50 years from now, or like great grandkids,
Yes.
and I don't know if you can separate what's really important to you or what advice you would give to them. It's probably the same thing. But what what would you say to them?
Be humble, listen, read the Bible, study yourself and with others, because it's the community of Christ, and we're all in it together and can benefit so much from each other.
Great. Now, you may not want to talk about this, but if you can think of off the top of your head some of the real high points of your life, or things that were challenging.
Oh, well, having my children was a high point.
Yes.
And settling on a person to marry.
Is that hard? Or what?
No, it wasn't.
Oh.
But, you go out with so many people and appreciate things about them, but, you just know, well, that one isn't right and that one isn't right. And I think the Berntsen family is a neat family. And Dave's parents and grandparents were all believers.
Uh-huh.
And were disciplined about their church, attendance and things,
Yeah.
and giving.
Yeah.
I think giving is really important, because the stewardship of not only time, which we've talked about, but I believe money. And that was one of the high points in my life, was hearing someone talk about the 10% tithe
Okay.
when I was young, and so I have always believed in that. And summers were highlights for me. The men that came to help do the threshing and putting up the hay.
When you were a kid.
When I was a kid, yes, and going to the creek and fooling around, and then going to Camp Colton, working there, and seeing all of these exciting kids from big towns.
Yeah.
Because I went to a 2-room school,
Oh, a 2-room school.
yes.
Okay.
And I had one teacher for the first 4 years of my grade school.
Okay. And did your mom do most of the cooking?
Yes. But my dad got up, built the fires, because we had wood heat. And he'd make oatmeal every morning.
Every morning.
And but other than that, my mom always did the cooking.
And did you put anything on your oat milk? What did you?
Cream and sugar.
Cream and sugar.
We
Yeah.
we had cows, so we'd skim the cream off.
Okay. Now, when did you get indoor plumbing?
Oh. Well, we had cold running water when I was a teenager, maybe.
Otherwise, you brought it in from a well.
Yes.
You pumped it and brought it in until you were a teenager.
Yeah.
Okay. And when did you get a indoor plumbing for a toilet?
When I was in college.
When you were in college.
Yeah.
And so, how did that work prior to that? You have an outhouse? Or
Yeah, we had an outhouse.
You have to go outside in the cold?
Oh, yes.
Did you ever use bedpans or anything like that?
No, we had a chamber pot.
Or a chamber pot?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And as far as a couple things that you remember eating a lot when you were a kid
Well,
for dinner.
my grandmother, for dinner, creamed peas. It's a Scandinavian thing, I think, creamed peas.
Okay.
And we were fairly poor.
Okay.
We had a lot of cultural experiences and things, but my mom would make hamburger with eggs and onions and things in it, like a meatball, but
Okay.
fried, and potatoes. She made very good desserts, but we didn't have them regularly. For an ordinary meal. We'd have canned cherries or
Okay.
plums or something. Baked goods were for mainly company or special occasions. And she was a good baker.
Okay. Now, real quickly, your dad was a Republican legislator
Leg-
legis, legislator for the state of Oregon.
yes, from the county of Clackamas.
Okay, and he was elected 13 times.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and um, and how did that? What was that like to have a farmer politician?
Well, sometimes we would resent all the time that he was away from home because it's hard to be away from home and farm.
Right.
And he kind of liked to do things the old-fashioned way. We had horses doing the plowing and the harrowing and everything.
Instead of tractors.
Instead of tractors, yes. We used a tractor for threshing,
Which means what?
separating the grain from the stalk
Okay.
and then filling the sacks and doing something else with straw. But we always brought our hay in with the socks and jerry.
Those are your horses.
Yeah. And it was exciting also to be going to things with our father, attending the legislature, and I have a picture of me in the little thing that I was introduced
Oh,
to the assembly.
Okay.
I think when I was just very little, as a newborn, you know. Got to run around the state capitol, and people would kind of adopt you and take you down to the cafeteria. And one thing I thought, buttermilk would just be a magical thing. So one time I ordered buttermilk, and it was not what I expected.
Oh, really?
Now I like it, but
Yeah.
so, you know, it was both worlds.
Great.
And I haven't talked about my maternal grandparents. They were more Swedish, talked more with a brogue
Okay.
and all, and were, he was a blacksmith.
Okay.
They came from Colorado, and she had a stroke when she was in her early 40s, so was always crippled, but did housework, made great bread.
And your mom's name was Ruth, and her maiden name was Palmgren,
Yes.
and her parents' names were what?
Eva Nordberg Palmgren and Victor Palmgren, and they didn't have middle names.
Oh, really?
And he pulled a plow in Sweden. He was like an indentured servant because his family was so poor.
So he was sold to work?
Well, no,
Or
he
not sold
yes,
to work,
he was sent to live with an uncle, I think, who wasn't kind, and he worked very, very hard. And he came over when he was about 16.
but wow.
So, you know, he didn't have a lot good to say about the old country
So when you say he pulled a plow,
in the field.
he physically did, or
Yes.
he worked with a horse?
No, he himself had to pull the plow.
Wow, that's real manpower.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was a big fellow,
Yeah.
but you think of a 16-year-old kid, you know,
Wow.
and younger.
But that's when he came over by himself
Yes,
when he was 16 from
That's-
Sweden.
as I understand.
Wow, that's interesting.
Now, these are some of the kinds of things like I might straighten out with Beverly, who's
Okay.
7 years older, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'm really pleased to have a nice daughter-in-law and grandchildren, and I'm glad that Chris, our oldest son, lives near us, and he's a good, attentive fellow in his quiet ways, and he goes to our church,
Uh-huh.
comes quite a few miles to attend, and we enjoy his company too, a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.